Welcome to North Penn Television. I'm your chef Cynthia Wood, and this is Meals That You Can Make. Today we're going to be doing a stuffed pork chop dinner along with a nice potato pie. So our ingredients we're using are center cut pork chops with a pocket cut in. We have about a half of a pound of sweet Italian sausage, about 10 ounces of sliced mushrooms. We have one small chopped onion and a couple of pieces of bread. We'll see how many we need, 2 to 3 pieces of bread. Then for our potato pie, you need 5 Idaho potatoes, some butter, some flour, a cup of milk, about a quarter of a cup of chopped parsley, and about 8 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese. Now, I have already started our potatoes, and the nice thing about this dish, I'll show you when we get going, is that you can actually, let me move these out of the way, we can make this ahead of time. You could do it the night before, you could do it earlier in the morning, and then you refrigerate it, and about a half an hour before you're going to sit down to dinner, you pop it in the oven, 375 degrees, and it's done in about 30 minutes. So if you want to start ahead of time, you can. So I've already cooked my potatoes off, and now I'm going to drain them in the sink. You want them fork tender, which is exactly what it sounds like. Stick a fork in them. See if they're done. Shake some of that water off. We're not going to use our lid. And then we're just going to, well actually, we'll leave those there for a minute. Now, we're going to do this all in the same pan because it cuts down on our cleanup time. We're going to use about 3 tablespoons of butter. There's that butter again. So we're just going to plop that in and melt that. And we're going to make a roux today, which we had talked about on one of the other episodes. And it's very easy to do. We're going to melt the butter. I'm going to get my whisk. We're going to take the same amount of flour as we have butter. So we have about 3 tablespoons. And we're going to melt this. I don't know if you'll be able to see into this pan, but we'll melt this down. And this is actually going to act as the thickening agent for our potato pie. Our butter's melting. And you don't want to cook this until it's like, you want it to bubble a little bit, but you don't want it to get like really, really thick and brown, or you will have to start over. I'm just going to put this in and stir at the same time so that we don't get lumps. And you'll be able to tell because it'll get thick, but not, you don't want it to be a solid blob or else it's not going to work with your milk. Okay, so now we're going to add a cup of milk. And we'll pour this right in and whisk at the same time. For the same reason, so that we don't end up with lumps, like lumpy gravy. Okay. Now, what we're going to add to that is a little bit of salt, about maybe a teaspoon and a quarter. And remember the trick, if you pour the salt right into the palm of your hand, that measures out to a teaspoon. So we'll put that in, and then just quarters, about a pinch more. We'll do a little bit of freshly ground pepper. And the reason that we're trying to hurry this is so that we can get it into the oven so that it'll be done by the time we're done. Okay. Now, we have some parsley that we're going to put in. You can add chives if you have them, fresh chives. Dried chives don't bother. Dried parsley flakes, same thing. Chives will add a little bit more flavor to it. So I've already picked this off of the stem, and we're just going to chop it up so that it's not big, big pieces going in. You don't have to worry about it being really, really finely chopped. Just make sure you don't have any huge pieces or any big pieces of stem, and wash it well, because parsley sometimes has a lot of dirt attached. Sometimes little critters too, so make sure you get that cleaned. And if you just keep going, it gets smaller and smaller. But you don't have to be too crazy about it. All right, now we're going to put this right into our white sauce, which is what this is. It's actually called a bechamel sauce, and that's when you make a roux with butter and flour and add milk. So that's pretty easy too. Now we're going to take our potatoes and dump those right back into the sauce. And then we are going to, whoops, missed one. Use a little bit of, you can butter your 10-inch pie plate, or we are going to use a little bit of Pam today. And this is actually a non-aerosol, so it's kinder to the ozone. And you just want to, if I can get it in here, loosen that up a bit, coat it so that things don't stick. It's easier for cleanup, and it also keeps your sauce and your potatoes from sticking to the bottom of the pan. Now we're going to take our little potato mixture and put this right into our pie plate. Be careful because it's liquidy. Now, if you were going to do this ahead of time, this is when you would want to put it in the refrigerator. And you could do it, like I said, the day before. I wouldn't advise doing it more than one day before, but you could do it the day before, or you could do it earlier the same day and refrigerate it now, and then pull it out a half an hour before dinner and stick it in. So we're going to put ours right into the oven. But first, we're going to top it with our shredded cheddar cheese. And you can use as much or as little as you want to. But I'm going to use about 8 ounces, about a cup or 2. I like cheese too. So we're going to spread that around. And I am going to pop this right into the oven behind me, which is set at 375. And I'm going to hopefully get it in here. There we go. All right, now we're going to really have to move because we have some stuff to do. We're going to start on our stuffing for our pork chops. And what we're going to do with that is we have about a half a pound of sweet Italian sausage. And I'm going to show you how to do this. It's in a casing. So you want to take a knife and cut through the casing. And it looks kind of yucky, but it's actually better this way because you can crumble it up and you can make sure that it's cooked to the point that it needs to be cooked to. You won't get any pieces that are still red in the middle. Just get rid of that skin, if I can. And then you're going to just crumble it up as you throw it into the pan. So first what I'm going to do is put a little bit of olive oil. You can use any kind of oil, but I have olive oil. Drizzle that around. Not a whole lot, maybe a teaspoon or 2. And then I'm just going to take this and crumble this in. And we're going to make the entire pork chop dish in this one pan. So far we've used one pan, now we have a second pan going. And it'll make cleanup easier. And we'll break that up, throw this in. Okay, one more piece. There we go. Now you can hear it starting to go. Okay. Now I'm going to wash my hands quickly. All right, now we have our onions that we've already chopped for our stuffing. You can use about a half, if it's a large onion, a half an onion, or just a nice small to medium onion. And it doesn't have to be really finely chopped. You can just chop it a rough chop. And it's going to soften up when we cook it. And then we have our mushrooms. Now these we may want to chop up a little bit. I've already washed them and sliced them. But depending on how many people you're feeding and how many pork chops you need to stuff, you might want to use less than this so that you don't have too much, or you could make extra stuffing and just serve it on the plate along with the pork chop, because that'll be good too, because it will all be cooked. So it's not going to be, you know, anything that you have to worry about, oh, it didn't go into a pan in the oven, because we're going to cook it right on top of the stove. So I am going to chop some of these up a little bit, just rough chop. And maybe, this is, I think, a 10 ounce package of mushrooms. And mushrooms do shrink when they cook, so you have to take that into consideration also. I mean, it might look like we have a whole cup here, but by the time we end up with it, it's going to be closer to a half a cup or 3/4 of a cup. So don't short yourself with them either, thinking that you have too many. Okay, so we have that. I'm going to stir the sausage a little bit. It's getting brown, smelling good. Now we're going to toss, since it's one side has already been browned, we're going to toss our onions in on top of that. There we go. Okay, we'll let that go for a minute, then we'll add our mushrooms. Meanwhile, I'm going to show you what to do with the bread. You can leave the crust on if you'd like. If you have an old dinner roll or two, stale bread actually works better than fresh bread. But we're just going to actually tear this, crumble it up a little bit. You don't want to use processed breadcrumbs because they're a little too fine. So if you use fresh breadcrumbs, you'll find that your stuffing will hold together better. We're going to break that up. And we'll start with 2 slices. If we have to, we can always add a 1/3 at the end. And then, and we're not going to add this to the stuffing until it's ready to go in to the pork chops. So now, give this a little stir again. And the thing too, if your sausage is not completely done, it's not really, I mean, don't put it in when it's still really pink, but it's going to cook more inside the pork chops. It's just that it's better to see that it's almost done before you put it in there, because the pork itself is going to have to cook for a little while, and you don't want to not have the things in the center cooked. So that looks pretty good actually to this point. So now we're going to drop our mushrooms in. And these are going to let out a little bit of juice. Mushrooms are a vegetable that hold their own water. So when they cook, they're actually going to release some of that water. I'm going to chop some more of these. And that's going to give us a little bit of liquid that when we throw our breadcrumbs in, will help it all stick together. There we go. I want to make sure I make enough stuffing because we have some nice sized pork chops to fill. And you can ask your butcher if they don't have them in the grocery store already cut. If they have the double thickness pork chops, it's easy enough to cut your own pocket into it, but if you're concerned about whether or not you'll be doing it right, you can always ask the man at the meat counter, and they're normally very happy to help. So don't hesitate to ask. Okay, now to season this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some thyme leaves, about a 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon. And there's ground thyme and there are thyme leaves, which look actually like little broken sticks. When you're using a dried herb, you use less than if you use a fresh herb because the flavor is more concentrated, but make sure that your herbs haven't been sitting in the cupboard for too long because then they start to lose their flavor. Now we're going to use some rosemary, and this looks pretty much the same way, like little green sticks all broken up. Sprinkle some of that in. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to put some salt in. Not a lot, just a little, which for me is enough. Okay. Now it's starting to let some of the juice out from the mushrooms. So what I'm going to do now is throw our breadcrumbs in. And you want to be careful when you're doing this. Let me move these out of the way. that you get everything mixed well, but don't don't use your fingers because we're still on the heat. I'm tempted to do that myself, but I'm not going to. All right. Actually, we look good. So now what we're going to do is pull this pan off the heat for a minute. I'm going to set it on my cutting board. Maybe a little thing underneath. And I'm going to take one, wipe up my knife, take a pork chop, and as you can see, it has this pocket cut into it. So we're going to take some of our stuffing. Please be careful. You can let it sit and cool for a little while. I'm not going to, but maybe I'll use my spoon. And stick this in there and then push it with your spoon to make sure that you get it deep inside there, because you want it to be filled. So we're going to push that in. There we go. So that's one filled. We'll do another one for you. Just dump that down in there. Push it in. And make sure you get a little bit of everything. Make sure you get some chunks of the sausage. You want to make sure that you get some of the bread. Push that in. There we go. And that's two done. Do another one for you. This one has a nice deep pocket in it. And we're almost ready. I think we will have a little bit of extra stuffing. So we'll just put that aside when we're done filling our pork chops. And you could even put it in a little dish and stick it in the oven or keep it near the stove to keep it warm. And then at the end, when we're just about ready to pull our pork chops out of the pan, you could throw it back in the pan just to make sure it's heated through. And then serve it on the side of the pork chops. There's a third one. That's really a full one. And one more. And this pocket's not very far open. I'll just stuff that down in there. And I am going to use my fingers now. It's cooling off a little bit. Make sure I get some mushrooms and some onion. Okay. There we go. Now, while I scoop the rest of the stuffing out of here and get my pan set and back on the stove for the pork chops, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Now batting, Brett Butler.
Butler? He's a dinosaur. They should rename this place Jurassic Park in his honor.
Dinosaur, huh? Did you know that Shunosaurus and Ankylosaurus dinosaurs were capable of delivering crushing blows with their bony tail clubs?
If education is important to you, talk to your child's school about raising academic standards. Call 1-800-38-BE-SMART for a free booklet and be a big league parent.
Even my third grader knows that.
Smart kids.
You are 100% unadulterated energy. You have no choice but movement. You aren't acted on. You are action. You have the power to make the world a better place. You already know how to do it. Volunteer now for the American Red Cross. Call your local chapter for details.
Hi, welcome back. If you're just joining us, we have our pork chops cooking. We stuffed them before we took our break, and then I put a little bit of olive oil into the pan and seared both sides. You want to do this with any cut of meat. The idea is that it seals in the juices of the meat. So I brown them on one side, turn them over, brown them on the other. Now I have a lid on my pan so that the pork will cook through to the center and the stuffing will stay hot. So that's cooking. And our potato pie is in the oven, and that's almost done. So while these things finish up, we're going to quickly review the ingredients that we used this week. We had center cut pork chops, The stuffing for the pork chops is a half a pound of sweet Italian sausage, crumbled up and cooked. We have a small to medium onion, roughly chopped, 2 slices of bread crumbled. Don't use fresh or don't use processed breadcrumbs. We had about 10 ounces of mushrooms sliced and then chopped up for our stuffing, a little bit of rosemary and a little bit of thyme and a little bit of salt. For our potato pie, you need a 10-inch pie plate that you need to butter or spray with Pam. You want to use 5 Idaho potatoes that are peeled and quartered and cooked ahead of time. Drain those off. Put 3 tablespoons of butter in your saucepan, the same pan that the potatoes had been in. Add 3 tablespoons of flour to the butter. Mix that together. Add 1 cup of milk. Add about 1/4 cup of chopped parsley and some salt and a little pepper. Toss your potatoes back in with your parsley and your bechamel sauce, and then pour that into your pie plate and top it with about 8 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese and bake that in the oven at 375 degrees for about 30 minutes. Now, if you want to make that the day ahead or earlier the same day, take it up to the part right before the cheese and stick it in the refrigerator. Half an hour before dinner, pull it out, put the cheese on top, and stick it in the oven. Now, I think that I'll check the pork chops quickly, see how they're coming along. We'll use this one. And actually, they look pretty good. Now, you could use a toothpick to keep the sides together, but actually, they, depending on how large the pocket is, they do stay together pretty well. And these are looking really good, but the way to check to see that pork is done, you want it to be to at least 170 to 75 degrees. And of course, people say, well, how do you know? But the idea is to use a meat thermometer. So I have one here. And what you want to do is stick it into the thickest part of the meat. So because this is cut in half, we could stick it straight in and get a temperature reading. And it's moving. Slowly but surely. Or the other way to do it, I'm going to leave it this way for now, would be to turn your pork chop sideways. Let's see if I can do this. And go in this way through the side, which I think I might do with this. And now it's moving more quickly. So I think I'll let these go for a couple more minutes. I am going to put the lid back on. And now if you do use a meat thermometer, don't take it and stick it right back in here, because if that meat's not cooked enough, well, don't do it anyway. But if there is any kind of bacteria, you're putting it back into the case, you're defeating the purpose of being a conscientious cook. So wash it off before you put it back into its little holder. So I'm going to put the lid back on the pork chops for now, for just another minute. They're almost done. Now with this dinner, you want to serve a nice green vegetable. Any vegetable will do. I made some broccoli. So I'm going to start by grabbing my plate and bringing my broccoli over. And I'm just going to lay some of those on here. It's a little hot. Use a spoon or tongs or something. It's not worth burning your finger. So now that we have that started, I'm going to go to the oven and grab the potato pie. And let me see if I can't get this out of here without. Remember to turn your oven off. And this looks really yummy. And I'll set that down here and then close my oven. I hope you can see how wonderful that looks. Okay, let me grab a big spoon. You can see how the cheese got nice and brown in the oven. We do have the liquid in here because it's the milk that we've added in, but this looks really good. So I'm just going to take a spoonful of this, pull my plate over, and this is called potato pie, I think just because it's in the pie dish. And this is really good for leftovers too the next day. We'll put that on there. Some nice brown, little spot, you know me with my spots. And now we will put a pork chop on. There we go. Got some stuffing in it. And there's our pork chop. And I'm going to put this back in so that I can serve that with these other 3 pork chops just to heat it through. So there you have it. We have our stuffed pork chop. It's stuffed with sausage and mushroom stuffing, potato pie, and some nice fresh broccoli. And as you can see, this is definitely a meal that you can make. We'll see you next time.
Sally wants to be a surgeon when she grows up. Maybe someday she'll operate on you. Now, would you like this free booklet of simple ways you can help improve her education? Call 1-800-96-PROMISE.
I hang out with a pretty trashy circle. The circle that helps this circle by recycling trash. We sort glass, plastic, separate cans, stack newspapers, and magazines. Now, thanks to us, there are lots of products made from things we've already recycled. This cereal box wants your Sunday paper. These paper clips, in a more daring life, a 56 convertible. The circle works like this. It starts when we recycle trash at home and at work. It's completed when we buy products made from or packaged in recycled materials. How do you know the difference? Check the label for something called post-consumer recycled content. It looks like this. Make a mental note. Then buy the highest percentage of it you can find. You'll save a tree, you'll save energy, and in your own way, you'll help save the world. Complete the circle.
Call 1-800-CALL-EDF for your free Buy Recycled shopping guide. 1-800-CALL-EDF.
Music is a way of learning, integrating all disciplines of education, creating a learning environment where children want to learn. Music is an important part of the classroom curriculum. Children experience history and world cultures as they listen to and perform music of other times and places.
What music means to me is to get a better education, making the sounds of the music and playing the notes.
Education in the arts promotes higher-level thinking skills by fostering creativity, imagination, self-discipline, teamwork, and self-esteem. Involvement in a music program leads to higher SAT scores.
The music program at North Penn has provided me with the skills I need to either pursue a career in music or even a hobby. I know that the North Penn music program will have provided me with the skills that I need to do so.
Music instills a sense of cultural identity and pride in our children. Music is the beat of education.
On the big highway of life, there's only one safe place for kids. Backseat, baby. The front seat's not the place to drop out. Don't want that big old bag to pop out. Backseat, baby. Put that booties in the backseat. Backseat, baby. Have that some kids you never meet. I'm here to remind you to put them behind you. Backseat, baby. Wow, let me hear it. Backseat, baby. To stay alive even when I drive.